We're back with It. Welcome to King of Our Nightmares. We're talking about Stephen King's It, or as Noah has, S.
S indeed. And I've got a bunch of copies. So the classic paperback. This is the first unabridged German translation of it. Because all the previous ones were shorter because it's a brick.
Yeah.
It's one of his longest ones, obviously. This copy is 1,530 pages.
Yeah, this is about 1,000 here. I have the re-release for It Chapter 2. Yeah,
I got those as well.
1,153 pages.
I got those as well, the movie tie-ins, which they did twice because there were two movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one you have in your left hand is the copy of what the audiobook looks like on Audible.
Hmm. And then something I have, because it's special, they did, I think for his birthday, a hardcover limited release.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Colored pages and everything. We don't get that often. So,
That's wild.
Yeah.
Mine's
with
falling apart.
With extras, you get the Derry News inside and an instruction how to make a paper boat.
That's funny. You should make a paper boat.
Oh yeah, put it on my shelf. So.
Oh Jesus! I didn't just put. I set it on the paper shredder. I forgot the paper shredder was on, but it did not go in the paper shredder. It wouldn't even be able to fit. But anyway, let's talk about It. So this book took years to write. I believe he started in 81, and it took till late 85. Was published in 86.
As it says right here, begun September 81 and ended the 28th of December.
And you can, at times,
which was yesterday.
Oh,
damn it! We missed an anniversary.
That would have been weird. But it was really, you can tell at times this was written over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of tacked on added stuff as the 80s went on. I wonder sometimes what was written first and what was written later. But the idea behind this was that Stephen King wanted to have all the classic monsters in a book.
Yeah.
And so he came up with a framing device of this being that can take on your worst fears and eats children primarily, but eats adults too, which is not explained very well. So this book is, I would say, is mostly good.
Yep.
With some very bad things, specifically near the end of the book, that kind of make the book fall apart. I think to like real hardcore King fans. And I get it. There are people that love The Stand, right? They love the characters in The Stand. For me, and for a lot of people, we like the characters in It. These are the characters we remember. The losers. They're all very distinct. They all are very well written because, I mean, they better be. It's over 1,000 pages. And there's only really 7 main characters. But this book takes place in 58 and 85 for the most part, with a few interludes that take place in other times that are more like told to Mike Hanlon, who's kind of our narrator for the interludes. It's not kind of, he is. So this book has like 3 different, I'm sorry, give me a minute. My freezer popped open and now it's making noises. Sorry.
All right.
Come on. I'm sorry, everyone. Our freezer broke the other day, so I have to have it duct taped shut. But the cats have now decided they like to jump on the freezer door and knock it open. So they just did that because my wife is outside and I'm in here. So anyway, so we've got a bunch of weird writing styles and they don't all work in this. So the book is primarily third person past tense, typical writing style. Oftentimes, especially in the second third of the book, when it's the 80s, it's in third person present tense.
Mm-hmm.
And when the flashback starts, it cuts into third person past tense until we get to the end and they flip it at the very end, which is really weird. And then the dairy interludes that are throughout this book are Dear Diary style, which is, it's just weird. So basically the book takes place in 58. A group of kids are drawn together because they've all witnessed this creepy clown named Pennywise who's tried to eat them. Bill Denbrough, also known as Stuttering Bill, his brother Georgie is killed in the very first chapter brutally by Pennywise the clown, which is the iconic scene that I think everyone remembers from it. Mm-hmm. Cut to late 84, where a hate crime happens against a gay couple, which is one of the most one of like three really not necessary things that is thrown into this book. And it's very clear King just wrote this sequence and he liked it and he put it in his book and it didn't fit, so he retconned something later to try to make it make sense by saying that the victim who is thrown over a bridge by a bunch of like bigots and gets his arm ripped off by Pennywise was childlike, even though he doesn't come off as that at all in the book. Sorry, Cleo has insisted to be on me.
Was this the plot point that you mentioned to me, that you think the old TV movie did better?
Yes. In the TV movie, it opens with a little girl being killed and some laundry. It's really creepy looking. And then Mike says, "It started again." And then we get all the terrible zoom in phone calls that just look terrible in that first half of that TV movie. So I've mentioned Mike. Mike is the token black character, although he's a lot more than that. He's a fleshed out character. His parents are poor farmers next to the awful Butch Bowers and his evil son Henry, who hate them. Mike has a love for the history of the town and becomes the town librarian, and he's the only one to remember what happened in the summer of 58. Because everyone else leaves and they forget. We got Ben Hanscom, who is the token fat kid, but I say token. They're all token characters.
Yeah, they are all classic archetypes.
Yes, but they're fleshed out enough that they're very likable. Ben has a knack for architecture and as an adult becomes like the quintessential architect in America. We got Eddie, the kid with asthma, but he doesn't really have asthma because his mom has Munchausen syndrome by proxy and has convinced him that he's sick. And so he ends up having like this really big limo company in New York. But he's like, he essentially marries his mother. And Well, that happened. So, we got Eddie, we got Richie Trashmouth Tozier, who's the one that talks trash to everyone and just does terrible impressions, who ends up becoming like a really famous DJ in the Los Angeles area. We got Stan, who loves his birds, but we don't get a lot of Stan because Stan early on kills himself as an adult, so he won't have to face Pennywise again.
We get more about his wife than about him.
Oh, that's terrible. That made me quit the book for a while. His wife's all just annoying. Not as annoying as Eddie's wife, but she's really annoying. That really sets up the fact that the losers can't have children, but they don't bring that up for another like 600 pages. But Stan likes his birds, and he's Jewish, but he's not really, I mean, he's of the Jewish race. It's a whole thing. We got Beverly, whose father's horribly abusive, and she becomes like a fashion designer, and her husband just acts like her father and is horribly abusive. And then I didn't even get to Bill. Bill becomes a writer. And
Bill becomes Stephen King.
He becomes Stephen King, which is really frustrating because he makes fun of the fact that Bill's like, I can't be a director because I'll have too much power. So there's like a weird jab at Maximum Overdrive. But it does lead to one of my favorite scenes in any Stephen King book, because he would never write this today, which is Bill's in a college class and he asks why everything has to be pretentious and why can't a story just be fun to read? And then the teacher tries to fail him, which is relatable. I had a similar incident when I was in film school that was like this. But he's married to like this actress and who looks like Beverly, we find out, which is just weird. There's a lot of weird like coincidences in it.
It's thematic. A lot of thematic stuff going on.
There's a lot of Freudian weirdness. And then we got like Henry Bowers, who's like the main bully who's like losing his mind. And then we got his like cronies, Belch and Victor are the main two. But then we also have the kid that stuffs animals in a refrigerator. Which is
Patrick Hockstetter.
Patrick Hockstetter, who gets,
and I remember that because King, he's reusing the name in here because there's a Dr. Patrick Hockstetter in Firestarter.
Yes. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Like, it's just the most pointless thing. We just have another sociopath running around. But the bullies are after the kids. The kids end up like sort of uniting, and it's cool to see that, like, because of like they're all bullied by the same people, they've kind of gravitated together. That was the point of the turtle. Because yes, there is a turtle that is flying around in space that is the enemy of Pennywise, which is a spider, but it's not really a spider because the human mind cannot comprehend what Pennywise is. And we have gotten this confrontation 3 different ways. Well, I mean, if we're okay, let me explain. The end of the climax of this book is 2 different climaxes at the same time that are very similar, and that's the point of King that King is making. He writes them the same way. Suddenly, the adults are no longer in present tense. They're in past tense. And it becomes really hard, to, especially if you're listening to this, to follow if they're adults or kids. The difference being that they're short a few characters as adults. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So oh God, what do I even say? They think they killed Pennywise, except for Stan, when they were in the summer of '58. They think that it crawled to its death, but it didn't. And so it goes on a killing spree again in the '80s, and Mike calls them all back because they made a blood oath that they were going to stop it, and things go awry.
Mm-hmm.
From Stan killing himself to like people's spouses getting involved to breaking Henry Bowers out of a mental institution. And you might be saying I'm spoiling a lot of things, but this is in like the first half of the book. It's all pretty clear what's going to happen. It doesn't mean that it takes away from the book, but this book is one half a horror story, the other half a world building of the town of Derry.
That's why its working title was just Derry. It very much is like a town history.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of engaging.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of the reason why it's a good book, but also a bad book. This is King throwing everything in there.
Uh-huh.
And it's bloated to an extent, obviously.
It could have done with a 200-page clipping. Like, take 200 pages out of it, and it would have been just perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But no, this is the third longest King book. It's shorter than Under the Dome and The Stand. But that's like not saying much because those are gargantuan books that also kind of throw everything in.
Indeed.
I think this throws the most things in. And it starts certain things that he will touch on later. Like a lot of the elements that worked in this show up in the first half of The Outsider. With the shape, it's another shape-shifting creature that preys on children.
Yeah, that's an element. Sure.
If only Holly Gibney was in it.
It would be so much better.
Oh yeah, I'm shocked he hasn't retconned her in. I mean, Gwendy is now retconned into the It lore.
Yep, that's a thing we have to mention at the end.
Well, we'll get to that in a bit because there are certain things that King has done actually not long after this that have soured this book. We got to talk about the connections because this is, if you read The Dark Tower, he's like fake author's notes in those books. I don't think they're real, but it is the inspiration for the tower and like all things connecting to the beam.
And the turtle.
Well, yeah, it's primarily the turtle, but there are other references. Of course, we get a Castle Rock reference because he can't help himself. It was fortunate it's only one Dead Zone reference to the Castle Rock Strangler.
Got a world build, you know.
Yeah, you got a world build. One of the characters from The Shining shows up. The cook from The Shining, whose name is Dick Halloran.
Dick Halloran, yeah.
Is in a flashback with Mike's dad. They both were stationed in the army at Derry.
That was like the first like big King connection I came across, I think. Because that really stood out. It's like, holy shit, this is a character from a completely different book.
I never caught it because I read this before I read The Shining. And I didn't remember that because it's such a small thing. And it's not said specifically that he uses The Shining to get, there's like a horrible fire because of like,
it's like a thing where it's like implied, oh, he knew there was going to be like fire and stuff and he got everyone out, and it's like hinted at, how could he know that? You wouldn't, it doesn't matter much in this book, but if you know The Shining and who this character is, you know, you catch what is going on.
Yes. And it doesn't linger on him too much, which is good because that would have been a complete digression. Do you see this? You see it? I'm just being harassed by this cat.
Yep.
There's one other that's a direct connection to a previous book, and
Oh, Christine.
Yeah, oh god, the Plymouth Fury shows up for no reason other than Christine was popular, probably because of the Carpenter film.
I mean, Christine is also in The Stand.
Really? When?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's in the book, but it's definitely in the comic because they drew Arnie as he looked in the Carpenter movie in the comic adaptation. So in The Stand, one of the characters finds a Plymouth Fury, and it has Arnie's initials on the keychain.
That's weird. That doesn't make any sense.
I know, but connection.
But yeah, the Plymouth Fury brings God, Henry Bowers to the hotel to try to kill them all. After he's fought Mike and barely survived. Which I got mixed up with the made-for-TV movie. They just all have a fight in the hotel, I think for convenience sake. Yeah. And Mike's injured in the scuffle. Also, there is a scare that I think actually works that is not from the book, which is Ben's vision of Beverly coming to his room, and it's Pennywise. He says, "Kiss me, fat boy." And that scared the ever-loving shit out of me as like a 10-year-old.
Nice.
I said, "No, don't kiss the clown." It's up there with the poop water in the book.
No.
The poop tea. There's a lot of poop because it lives in the sewers. And that's how it's like. So it was. We got to explain what Pennywise is.
We can try to explain.
Yeah, we can try to explain how it's explained in the book versus what fans have decided it is and what King decided later that it is. So it was an interdimensional being.
Cut to George Lucas.
Yeah, it was an interdimensional being that thought it and the turtle only existed, and when Madron, which is not called Madron, we're just going to call it Madron because that's what it's called in the Dark Tower, created the world. Pennywise crashed into what would become Derry, Maine in prehistoric times and just lived under the ground and fed about every 27 years. And then once people started settling in Derry, every 27 years there'd be a bunch of horrible murders and crime would spike as it played off of people's fears. Cut to 58, the kids realize this, they stop it abruptly. And then in 85, it learns fear and hate, and it devises a plan to lure them back. Which is, it's so weird. So I'm trying to remember because Madron shows up and talks to Ben twice. So the end of this book becomes incredibly incoherent, is the best way to put it.
I'm going to assume mostly in audio form.
Yes.
Because in text, they also, the two timelines intertwine as well. But I think in the book, it was easier to keep track.
In the audiobook, I must say, it's a new audiobook. It's very well done, except for this.
Okay.
So Bill is the strongest of all of them. And so he's the one that talks to the turtle. And the turtle says, "You have what you need." But I genuinely can't remember if the turtle shows up in 85.
No, he finds his empty shell, implying the turtle is dead.
Okay, because Pennywise says that he killed the turtle, or that the turtle choked and died. which is the breaking of a beam.
I think so. No, is Maturin's beam still standing in Dark Tower?
So Maturin guides Jake in Wastelands, but that's in the 70s. So he could. Well, I don't know, because doesn't Maturin help them in Wizarding class?
Does he? I think they find a statue of him. But I don't think he himself or his presence is like there.
And this is why this gets fucking confusing, because so these Pennywise and Maturin are ever in battle on beam, and there's these multiple beams. They connect to the Dark Tower. We haven't even gotten to when this is explained in the Dark Tower, because it's not explained in the first book. I don't even think it's explained until Wizarding Glass, when we finally figure out what is actually going on and what the adventure is supposed to be. I mean, Roland doesn't quite care one way or the other, because Roland's a selfish character. He just wants what Roland wants, which is slightly confusing.
I mean, this is also interesting thinking about it, because before he changed it to the Crimson King, the main villain at the tower was supposed to be a giant spider. So this could have tied in even more.
Well, then let's get into this. So at the end, Ben, in 85, Ben has to kill the offspring of Pennywise, because it is female and it is pregnant in the 50s, and it's laid all these disgusting eggs. And here's what confused me. And it's not King's fault. It is the adaptations of King stuff put to film. When the kids fight Pennywise, they never see the spider in the films. They only ever see the spider as adults. And I've seen those more times than I've read the book. I've only ever read this book twice. Once when I was 12, and the other time was for this. So there was only a handful of things I remembered from this book. I remembered liking the 50s stuff, with the exception of the animal cruelty and the
what scene.
The kids end up doing at the end, which we haven't gotten to, but is just nonsense and disgusting. But so the whole point is that the timelines converge at the end. That's not how it's ever been done on film, because a general audience would be genuinely confused by this. And
I would respect it if they actually attempted that with the timelines and the turtle.
Well, they always, that was the thing with the theatrical films, was they said they were going to put the turtle in. And they put teeny tiny references to the turtle that don't quite make sense in the context of the films. Because I must say, the later films, the theatrical releases, they're well acted, but they are genuinely bad. So instead of setting it in the 50s and the adults in the 80s, they set the kids in the late 80s and the adult segments in the 2010s, because these came out in the 2010s. Makes sense on two fronts. The first being that, like, we can film one of these in modern day and save money. The other is to market to the Stranger Things audience that was really popular when the first one of these films came out. In fact, the kid who plays Richie in the film adaptation is one of the leads in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
The problem with this is that they take all the stuff that I think everyone really likes from the book, which is can we just say these are the best kid characters King ever wrote?
Probably, yeah. I mean, they should be, with all With how big this book is, yeah, definitely they should be.
They are all unique. You love all of them. Like, they're just really well written characters,
and they are relatable.
And there's just something lost with the adults, and that is the point of the book.
Yeah,
it doesn't translate to film well. So when you split it up, and they even did this with the made-for-TV movie because it came out in 2 parts. The first part is primarily the kids with the phone calls, which is a wonky chapter, by the way. It's a 3.5-hour chapter in the audiobook.
Yeah, that chapter is like 200 pages.
It's too long. I get why it's long, but it just becomes really tedious. Except for, I will say, I like Beverly's stuff the best when she beats up her awful husband.
Good stuff.
But other than that, it's pretty tedious. And Stan kills himself. But that's at the beginning of the chapter. It's like, I get we have to have some semblance of dread, but it just makes the rest.
I mean, it's just a little thing in that chapter. Most of it is on his Jewish wife, the Jewish mermaid.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah, which is utterly pointless and leads nowhere in the book.
It gives her some character, but at the same time,
she never shows up again.
Yeah. I guess it establishes more about Stan. Because he kills himself, we don't get his perspective, so we get his life through the eyes of his wife, I guess.
And then later with his friends.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I was getting at, so with the climax. So in the TV movie, the first part of it, they fight Pennywise, and he's primarily in his clown form. And they do the same thing in the theatrical release, although they, for some reason, they have Beverly kidnapped, which I find really stupid. That's the framing device into why they go into the sewers, not that they're chased by Henry and his goons, which works so much better in every other adaptation. Although Henry and his goons show up, and then Mike kills Henry, which was one of the weirdest choices made in that first chapter. I was genuinely baffled by that when I saw it in the theater. Because I saw that one. I didn't see chapter 2 in the theater because I was not a fan of chapter 1. Because every scare is exactly the same. It's like watching one of those Paranormal Activity movies. The soundtrack gets quiet, and it does a boo scare. Big mouth boo scare. Although, like, it does more gross things than the made-for-TV movie did, because obviously that one was made for cable television. But, like, in both of those, it's Pennywise in his clown form, although we get some weird things in the film, the 2010s version, with all the kids are floating in the deadlights. Which, okay, that's a stylistic choice, I guess.
That's something visually interesting, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't add anything. But in the TV version, we do get a spider leg that shows up at the end when it's crawling away. But that's all you get of the spider thing. And then in the 2010s version, you don't get any of that. And then it gets like a big old to be continued, basically. But the spiders in the films look horrible. Have you seen the films, Noah?
So I saw the first one, and I liked it in the sense it was well made. The kids were pretty good.
Well acted.
Yeah, and it's well acted. Again, the scares obviously didn't scare me, but I thought like the atmosphere and stuff, that was enough to carry it. It captured that part, I thought. But the second one, I just never bothered seeing. I own it, but I haven't watched it. I know it's way too long. Isn't it like 2.5 hours?
And they add more kid stuff in, and they de-age.
That's what I've heard, that they filmed more stuff with the kids while they went through puberty, which is stupid. And they had to like
some of those kids were adults.
Yeah, they had to like use CGI to make like the Stranger kid look younger again.
Yeah, and they pitch shifted his voice. It's terrible, but like it's not good. James McAvoy plays Bill, which
Nice.
I cannot.
I saw that scene with him talking to Stephen King.
Yeah, but so you know how in the made for TV one, it's like a weird. It's got like a bipedal body on a spider.
Yeah.
This time because they really liked, I can't remember who the actor is that plays Pennywise in the new ones.
Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, he's a centaur spider, but he's in clown form. At the top half, the back half's a spider, and it looks horrible. It looked horrible in the '90s show. Like I genuinely, the first time I saw the '90s version, I laughed out loud. I'm like, this is what we've been building to. And then I like read the book. I'm like, oh, it's a horror that the human mind cannot comprehend. And so the closest thing it can comprehend is a spider, because of course it is. It's a Stephen King book. And when it gets this long, we get the unholy trinity of eye gouging, spiders, and hard R-ing. Although we don't quite get hard R-ing in this. I can't use the actual word because YouTube will take down the video. Instead, in order to find their way in the sewers after the conflict, the kids all have sex with Beverly. And it is told from her perspective. It's the only time we really get stuff from her perspective in this way. And they talk about the kids' parts because they're too young. That's like they're all 11. All right. They were like really beginning to start puberty, I guess. And it's so immature, bizarre. They're trying to connect with the turtle because they get lost in the sewers. And it's just weird.
Yep.
And embarrassing to read. It's the thing I remembered as a kid just being truly baffled by, because I wasn't much older than these kids. And I'm like, why is this happening? Like, I knew this is just weird. And like, now knowing that King was on drugs, he looks like that. Yeah.
That wasn't intentional, but yeah.
It's that era King. And it's just like, why? Why does this have to be in there?
Well, King fans try to defend this. Obviously, it's like thematic. They give up their childhood and stuff.
Yeah,
when the real answer, yeah, but we all know the real answer is King is a pervert, and he was high on drugs, and he wrote this.
Yes,
that's kind of it. Because yeah, it's 2 pages, I would say, and his only defense when asked about it is just like, oh, people complain about the sexual stuff with the kids, but you don't complain about the violence, when the kids get murdered. And it's like, that is very different, Steve.
It's not like the kids murdered someone. The protagonists, the kids never kill anything. I mean, the bad kids do.
Yeah.
The kids never kill anything. In fact, most of them, the only 2 main characters, well, actually, I take that back. Eddie kills Henry Bowers in defense. But other than that, there's a big thematic thing, and it's Mike's character. He has the chance to kill Henry, and he realizes that he'd be doing Pennywise's work, and he holds back. And that's sort of a thematic thing until they get to the final confrontation in the 80s, and it's Richie and Bill are the ones that kill Pennywise, or do they? Then we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Because that overshadows this book, unfortunately. And then Ben kills all the babies, or does he? Because we have Dandelo, which may or may not. I was in the forums yesterday.
Oh,
that's a whole unique thing, because I'm like, there is a character in the final main Dark Tower book that is called Dandelo, and it's also in Insomnia.
No,
it's not in Insomnia.
It's
It
not.
deals with
Dandelo
a character that was from Insomnia.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is a shape-shifting thing. Similar
that has a robot serving him called
Stuttering Bill. And there's a thought, because King's never really confirmed this, that Dandelo is one of the spawn of Pennywise.
Well, the way I read it, it's like a twinner, like a talisman. It's like a different universe version of Pennywise, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's the thing is, Dandelo is easily dispatched once they realize what it is.
Yeah, and he changes his form a couple of times while he's dying. One of the forms is a clown.
Yes, which is why like people think that it's like the spawn. But here's the thing. Here's what Pennywise is according to fandom, and based on Dark Tower and other stuff. It is the first creature to come from Toadash. And lots of things come from Toadash. I say first as in chronologically, it's first because technically all the things from the Mist are from Toadash. That the government accidentally ripped a hole in Toadash and brought all sorts of nasty bug things into America. It essentially caused an apocalypse. Those are technically Toadash creatures. And we've talked about Toadash before. We talked about it in the last episode of Skeleton Crew, where it's possible that in Mrs. Todd Shortcut, I think that's the short story, they are going Toadash, and that's why she can like interdimensionally travel and gets younger.
Yeah.
Like, because Toadash does weird things to people. It's just not really ever stated so much as like Roland cautions about Toadash in Wolves of the Kala. And they basically, in that, as I recall, it's been several years since I read Wolves of the Kala. He leaves it up to Ka when they go Toadash. But they're sort of like the chosen, his quartet are the chosen ones, so it's going to affect things differently. And it's King and continuity don't go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, Callahan is traveling Toadash in Wolves of the Kala. That's how he ends up in the Kala.
Yep.
But there are creatures in Toadash that essentially all end up in Maine. And Pennywise is the first one chronologically. And it's probably different because it is part of like the gods of the beam. If they're basically gods, like when we get to Wastelands next season, we can talk about the bear.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember the name of right now.
Shardik.
Which that is awesome and bizarre. And very Dark Tower. But like Madron and Pennywise are beings of the beam and of Toadash. But I'm trying to... We gotta talk about Pennywise isn't really dead. So the book, I'm going to spoil. It seems definitive that good wins.
Yeah.
Like with The Stand. More so than The Stand, because The Stand, people
It has
are
like
gonna,
the stinger with Flag arriving on that island, and the cycle is gonna start again.
yeah. Well, that was the uncut version. The cut version doesn't have that. That was to. I honestly think King wrote that in 1990 to make sense of what he was doing in Wastelands. And why Flag is potentially in the next book we'll be reviewing on here. But I'm trying to. So Pennywise shows up in other things, later things. Shows up in a book we'll be talking about a couple episodes from now, Tommyknockers. That was when I was like, I read that after it. And I was like, why is this happening?
How is that happening? Because the timeline doesn't add up.
Is it just been knocked out of cycle because of what happened to its body? But you're the one that read it. Gwendy's Final Task.
Yeah. Gwendy's Final Task features everyone's second favorite Stephen King character, Gwendy, second after Holly Gibney, of course.
Richard Chisma's favorite Stephen King character.
Oh, yeah. He wrote the middle part of her trilogy all by himself. He loves her so much. So Gwendy's Final Task, that book, the story is set in 2026 for some reason, by the way. Don't question it. It confirms two things. One connects to the tower, not relevant for this discussion, but the other point, she goes to Derry. Derry is a plot point in there. And it is mentioned by a policeman, if I'm not mistaken, that there was like encounterings in the 2010s. So it's still happening. It's still going on.
Gwendy's universe is the film's universe.
The what's universe?
The film universe from the theatrical releases.
Oh, I don't think so. I think they reference other stuff. I know they reference Dead Zone. The first Gwendy book does that, obviously, and like Sheriff Bannerman.
Well, because it takes place in Castle Rock.
Yeah, exactly. But then they go to Derry, and I do think they reference some other Derry classics, like the things. But yeah, that book more or less establishes for sure it is still around, which was hinted at already in Dreamcatcher.
Oh, that's right.
That one was very explicit as well. Because that one of the main characters, they go to Derry, they go to like this water tower thing, which was destroyed, and there's like a memorial thing in memory of all the children, and then there's every name of the Losers Club members. And then spray painted over it are the words, Pennywise lives. And that was never followed up upon. That was just King high on his like medication after the car accident. He was like, I'm gonna just do this.
Well, that's when the term shit weasel, one of my favorite terms, was coined.
Yeah. The book gave us shit weasels and hopes of an It sequel that never materialized.
And he has no intention. That's something I want to make clear, because people ask, because he just keeps writing Holly Gibney books
and sequels nowadays since the 2010s for some reason, like Dr. Sleep, Rattlesnakes, Talisman 3, maybe.
The big thing he's confirmed is Talisman 3 that he's working on, which will be a Dark Tower related thing, because we're probably not going to get Jericho Hill, which I think is what just about everyone wants. But he said he had no intentions of making it 2.
Because what you got to do,
Well, they're all old. They're all his age. That was like the point. This is, like we said before, where Bill is his surrogate king.
Mm-hmm.
It's his weird fantasy version of himself that's also self-deprecating. Not as much as he will.
Lots of King characters, the writer main characters.
But this one more so. This really feels like Stephen King himself.
Yeah.
They're all old. Like this whole book, this and The Body are very much him dealing with childhood trauma from his friend getting run over by the train that he's blocked out of his mind but has been told happened.
Mm-hmm.
The Body, I think, a little more so than
definitely. This is about finding a dead body that was hit by a train.
Mm-hmm. Where it is about dealing with childhood trauma and how to cope with things that happen to you when you're young, and also finding that it's okay to grow up. It's like the other theme of this, because like the losers, when they all get back together, they start feeling young again.
Mm-hmm.
And they start acting like kids, which leads to really funny things that made for TV movie.
Oh, the bicycle.
The bicycle, the touching of one another and like hugging. So it's very clear that director did not know how to direct adults. Because it's not like there are bad actors in that. I mean, Stuttering Bill's played by the guy who was John Boy on the Waltons. Like, is a well-known TV actor. Like, they're not bad. They're all working actors, but they're all really bad in it.
And I don't know what it is, because that director made my favorite Halloween movie, Season of the Witch.
Oh, is that the same director?
What's his name? Tommy Lee Edwards or something? But yeah, that's him.
Oh, that's weird. Well, there really aren't any kids in Season of the Witch.
Well,
there's the one that becomes the bug face, but like that's the only one that lingers for any length of time. There are kid extras,
mm-hmm.
But that's just Tom Atkins, who for some reason John Carpenter thinks is like a hunky man. Even though he's like the most average human being that's ever existed. He gets all the babes.
Yeah.
Because like it's also the fog. It's like
no one can resist Tom Atkins. Come on. But that just reminds me of a point I want to make. I think the grown-ups part of the story is always the weakest in the book and in the adaptations.
But I think the book, it's on purpose.
Oh yeah, I would say in the book there's a point to it.
Although I will say some of the creepier stuff happens to the adult. The poop tea. The poop tea is like, oh god, that whole sequence with the witch. So I was out to dinner with my dad, and this is the one Stephen King book he's actually one of two. He also read Desperation, but he read it and it scared him, and he's like, oh, the witch. And I literally got to the witch part immediately. And the whole tea sequence, the tea is poop, and then her dad's in drag. It's Beverly. Beverly tries to see her childhood home because they're trying to remember things. She goes to her old home to see if her father's still alive, and he's not. But that made me so uncomfortable as a child that a father would say those things to his daughter. But it ties into like a scene that happens near the end of the book with her standing up to her dad and her dad being like a weird perv. And like, but he's very complicated in the book is the best way to put it. So in the made-for-TV movie, he's an out-and-out asshole. In the movie, he comes off as like a creepy sex pervert. Both are very one-dimensional. In truth, in the book, he's like a bit of both, but also like psycho-y caring. There's like a lot to him. It's like how Eddie's mother, there's like more nuanced stuff with her in the book. With her just being afraid and channeling her fear into Eddie. because I totally forgot about how his like asthma medication is just licorice water, basically, and it's fake. And like the
that's
pharmacist,
one of the scenes I remember. That was a really standout.
the pharmacist is like, "Yeah, your mom's kind of crazy and full of shit, and you need to like stand up to her." And the sad thing is he doesn't. I mean, he does in the sense of when his arm's broken, uh, he tells her like he confronts her, but the sad thing is once the whole confrontation is done, it's implied that he never stood up to her again, and then he ended up marrying a woman that was just like his mother, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
He's successful, but like him and Beverly are successful, but they're just miserable and don't really understand until Mike calls how miserable they actually are.
Yeah. That's when he puts the pictures of his mother next to the picture of his wife, and then he's like, "Oh my god, those could be sisters."
Yeah, and then he yells at his wife and leaves her and never speak. That's the sad thing. Can we get into more spoilers?
Sure.
Eddie dies. He dies horribly. Well, he gets mangled the most of this whole book. He gets his arm broken twice, and then he gets his other arm ripped off, and he bleeds to death. Pennywise bites his arm off. Like he's like basically the final sacrifice
to
stop Pennywise, but all for nothing, apparently, according to other Stephen King books. So he dies. His wife never sees him again, and she's like codependent on him, and she's so worried about taking Al Pacino in the limo. That's a whole plot line that like it's not even a whole plot line. He's supposed to drive Al Pacino because he's like the boss of his like limo company, and when Mike calls, he drops everything, and he makes his wife do it, and she's like worried that Al Pacino's gonna yell at her, and she's gonna cry. He's just worthless. It's just so weird. It's like it's Al Pacino, like it's an actual actor. I mean, it adds some weight, I guess, but it's so strange because like Richie also has like a celebrity interview, but it's like a smaller celebrity that isn't still like a big name that you're supposed to interview. And Richie's like, no, I'm leaving. But Richie has to do his weird voices, which when you initially meet Richie, when you initially meet all the characters, with the exception of Bill, they're all adults first. And then it flashes back throughout the book. But Richie has his character Kinky Briefcase. Can we talk about Kinky Briefcase, which is I guess that's 80s humor.
That's Stephen King 80s humor?
I no, because it's similar to Eddie Murphy's humor because they both make fun of AIDS. There's a lot of in the first quarter of this book making fun of the AIDS virus and the LGBTQ community. It's terrible. It's kind of shocking. Like he would not do this today. He wouldn't. Here's the thing. We talked about this in like a couple of previous books in the 80s, like Cujo specifically. He would never write a main character woman so weak like he did the mom in Cujo. Like 10 years removed, he's writing some of like his best work, which is very feminist, right?
Dolores Claiborne.
It's the same thing in this, where like we're starting to see the feminist king because Beverly overcomes a lot of things, and it's Beverly's choice to have the bizarre sex stuff as kids. it is her decision to do that. It's sort of his weird beginnings of that. The transition from being drug addict to feminist King has begun, but like he would never write LGBTQ stuff like this now. He would never. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be acceptable now, but he would never try to do this. Or the amount of Richie's like racist characters, they're very. My grandfather, child of the 50s, about a little older than King, he used to spout off jokes like that. It's just, and you just like cover your face because it's so embarrassing, especially when it happens in public. Like the Poncho Vanilla, or the very racist black slave voice.
Oh, he still does that. That is the only stuff he's still doing in modern books. But the N-word is still frequently used.
But the main characters don't do that, and they're likable anymore. The villains, they'll say the N-word.
Oh, the villains, sure. But, he does that with, like, Jerome in the Bill Hodges books, and then later the Holly books. But more early on, Jerome is, like, the black guy, the greatest. He's muscular, he's intelligent, from a good family. And then he just does, like, this weird, like, black ghetto accent for fun. And it's so cringy.
It's a little different because it's a black character doing that. I mean, it's weird a white person's writing that. That's almost unacceptable. That's weird.
It depends on the execution, and when you read it, you just picture 75-year-old Stephen King writing that. And it's supposed to be like a cringy joke within the context, but still it's not working.
But it's not a white character saying it to a black character and the black character accepting it. Although I will say one of the only positive of all that is Mike gives Richie shit back. Like they all give Richie shit because when he's a kid, he's genuinely terrible at impressions. But as an adult, he's actually pretty good, and they're all shocked. Except for he does his Irish cop voice against Pennywise, which for some reason stops Pennywise. I guess that's
he's
part
that
of
good.
If you believe in it, like it will stop him because he's like an intangible creature. But he's also a tangible creature because like Eddie believes that his aspirator, his like inhaler, it's like battery acid if he has to use it too much. So he sprays it on Pennywise and it burns Pennywise. Of course, he tries it again and loses an arm in the process. But it does poison Pennywise because he believes it. Pennywise has to believe it. That's why they use the silver. Because they're fighting the werewolf in the Neibolt Street house, which we haven't even talked about Neibolt Street.
There's so much to talk about.
Oh no. Here we go again. The cursed stream.
Yeah.
But it's just one of the this book, because it's so freaking long. The other day, it was this morning, we had a big rainstorm here, which the sun is finally out for the first time in probably 7 days. My internet's finally somewhat working properly. Otherwise, this stream would be twice as glitchy. But anyway, so we got a huge rainstorm last night and early into this morning. It just cleared up probably about an hour ago. But we have a creek behind the new place. Which I don't know if you noticed. It's a new setup. It's a lot better of a setup, I think. So the problem, like, we have a creek, and like I said, oh, it's like the Kenduskeag, and I said it without mentioning, oh, that's from a book. because King, I don't think any of the water, like the creeks and stuff, like I can remember all the street names like Kansas Street and like Neibolt Street and stuff because this book's so flippin' long. It's like they're real things, but Derry's not a real town. That's like where like King excels in this book is he makes Derry feel like a real town. Like more so than here's the thing. We have a lot of Castle Rock stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never think that Castle Rock's real.
Yeah, the closest he gets is Needful Things, probably.
Thing. Here we go again.
Okay.
The
Did you hear
closest he
that?
gets is Needful Things.
Yeah.
The death of Castle Rock that was never the death of Castle Rock.
Yeah. A couple short stories and then Gwendy.
Yeah. You know,
but
whatever.
with Derry, it definitely feels like a history of a town, probably because he took a lot of inspiration directly from cities in Maine, mainly Bangor.
Yeah, and it feels the most lived in, I think, out of all of his towns. It's just really funny because, like, the only one that comes close, in my opinion, is the Lot from Salem's Lot.
Mm.
That's the one that comes close because that is it's the archetype for Needful Things. That's the destruction of a town.
That's always when he really goes into the town history and the different characters currently living there.
And like Derry sounds like a town you would find in Maine, like name wise, and how it functions and stuff. It's not like let's take another town he makes up that shows up in quite a few things because Derry shows up in a lot of stuff. Like he's been alluding to it on and off up until this book, and then he will allude to it on and off. Let's take Ogunquit. Ogunquit is where Franny Goldsmith's from in the Stand. Ogunquit seems like a fake town. I mean, it's just a place made up. Too many things that happened in Castle Rock, and most of them are bad. Like, especially if they came from Skeleton Crew, they're mostly terrible. I mean, there's some things I love. The Body is another good one. I just remembered a connection that's in this. Shawshank.
Right.
Shawshank's referenced directly, just as a prison that's there. It's not like they reference characters that are from Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption, but someone goes to Shawshank. A side character goes to Shawshank in one of the interludes and ends up doing time there. But anyway, that's about. I've about said all I want to say. There's some creepy scenes. I've intentionally been vague about them because I believe they should be witnessed in their entirety. I mean, like the stuff, anything from the leper to like the mummy, the werewolf, pretty much set up well. Even the goof. Like that stuff, like it just works, and because they believe in it. We focus primarily on the climax because that's where this book kind of falls apart. and it just becomes hard to follow. Although I will say one last thing, there's like sort of a I'm not going to even there is an epilogue to this that is it works in the book, it does not work on film.
Okay.
With Bill and his wife on the bike beating the devil again. It's fine in the context of the book. It looks stupid on film. It doesn't. You don't truly understand the depths of things, and we haven't talked about how like his wife gets involved with the whole Pennywise thing, because that's kind of nonsensical and a weird twist that doesn't quite work, and I don't get why she's still alive. That was bizarre. Oh, well, we didn't talk about the Deadlights.
Oh yeah, and they, by the way, they also show up again in other works.
Yes, the Deadlights are what kills people, drives them insane, makes Beverly's husband's eyes blow up. Well, he has a huge brain hemorrhage and bleeds out his eyes when he witnesses the Deadlights, but for some reason it doesn't kill Bill's wife and makes her catatonic. But like, why?
So we can have that happy end moment.
But that felt tacked on.
Yeah.
I don't get why we had to have that twist in there. It's like he didn't want to commit to the infidelity thing, because that's a weird like one-off thing that Bill and Beverly hook up.
Yeah, that happens.
And we get a porn scene because it reads like, I mean, it's just out of place and weird. Because Eddie married his mother, but Bill married a less attractive version of Beverly, I guess. Who doesn't have Beverly has better boobs, which is something that is actually talked about in this book. And I'm just like, King, too much alcohol, too much nose candy. And then conveniently everyone forgets things. And I think it's because King's morality stepped in and he didn't want to edit what he'd written.
He was semi-sober that day.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder, because Tommyknockers is his book that his writing exercises of being sober. Makes me wonder if he was still like he would be sober when he wrote some of this. And that's why things kind of tie together.
I mean, on some days, on like the 4 or 5 years it took to write, he must have been somewhat sober.
I don't know. Does he even remember writing this?
I think he does. I think he said the only book he really doesn't remember at all is Cujo.
Which is wild, because Cujo's pretty coherent.
Yeah.
Because, like, Skeleton Crew, it feels like a crackhead assembled it. Like, we talked about that last episode. This feels like a crackhead assembled it. It's better than Skeleton Crew. I would honestly say this is still a good book, despite, like, the negative things we've talked about. It's got probably his strongest characters he's ever written, at least for this era, that aren't Dark Tower characters. I won't count Dark Tower characters because they have multiple books.
Yeah. As far as standalone books go, this may be his best, his last great child characters.
Well, I mean, he'll have a child character here or there.
That's great, yeah, but like overall, I mean, compare this one to The Institute.
The Institute,
it's like night and day.
Willie the Weirdo. Sorry, that's the one that first came to mind. Well, the kid in Desperation isn't bad.
Hmm.
He's probably the one I liked the most when I read Desperation, but I was also a kid when I read Desperation. The kid in Insomnia.
Is there a kid in Insomnia?
I think there is a kid in Insomnia. I can't
Well,
remember.
there's Patrick, who's kind of like a main thing, but he's not really a character.
I could be mixing things up. Oh, well, Jake.
Yeah, Dark Jake, obviously, but he has like also multiple books.
Yeah,
That's.
I can't remember. Well, oh no. Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
She's the last. Well, and that was written for kids, but he wanted to swear in it. That I love.
I guess Bobby Garfield in Hearts in Atlantis would also qualify as like decent.
It's like he got into the 2000s. Once he was done with Dark Tower, the kids were never written well.
I think it's also because like Hearts in Atlantis, that's like also set in like 60s, right? With the Bobby as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's specifically in that era, Joyland, a main character is like 21, I think, in that, and that's set in the 70s. So he can write in that time frame. Well, when he sets it there with Chill, because he was still young at that time.
He doesn't get the tech.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Like, I don't think people really want him to write modern stuff. No. But I mean, do you want him to write stuff that takes place in the modern day, or would you rather him write things that happened in the 50s?
50s?
Yeah, same.
Some of his best, like 11/22/63, mostly takes place, in the 60s.
Yeah, most people love it. Young.
Yeah, and then Joyland in the 70s. That's good stuff. Revival starts 50s, 60s with the main character as a kid, and then we follow him to modern times when he's an old man, and that works. Because we see him as a kid, and similar to King. That makes sense. But he insists on writing modern day, so it's like relatable to the readers.
Yeah, that worked when he was young. But yes, you hit a point like where you can't. He doesn't have his kids are all grown, and like I don't know what his like relationship is with his grandchildren, but you're removed.
Yeah, King is not gonna be able to write about Skibidi Toilet.
No, I don't want King to write about.
Yeah, that. No one wants that, and I'm pretty sure if you ask most fans, like, "Hey, would you like King to write a book set in the 70s again?" Most would be like, "Yes."
Well, here's the thing I liked about You Like It Darker. I liked that he was writing older people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the strong point of You Like It Darker, is they're his age. And they're dealing with that's like the big theme of that book, that collection. It's people moving on. And thematically, if he were to never write anything again, I mean, I'm not saying a lot of those stories aren't that great. There's some real stinkers in You Like It Darker. But like I'm thinking of like Danny Coughlin's Bad Day or Bad Dream.
Mm-hmm.
Where like he doesn't really understand how phones work, and that's like his undoing at first.
Yeah.
And he's the youngest character that's like good, well written. He's like my parents' age. And my parents are pushing 60, But like I think of two it's like Two Talented Bastards is if Joe Hill was writing the memoir of Stephen King, or like reading whatever, reading that journal. That's what I thought of, like, while reading that. Or what's the one with the older guy that gets the dog and discovers the body under the pier?
Laurie.
That
was a good one. Yeah,
that's a good one.
The thing, yeah, when he writes old people his age, it makes sense and it works. Like I said, with Revival, that was great because it went from the 50s with him as a kid to 2014 with him as an old man.
Could we get an It sequel then?
Oh,
they all are in like wheelchairs and walkers going through the sewer.
And they all love their cell phones and stuff, you know.
They all have jitterbug cell phones.
Oh man.
If they're what's left of the losers.
Yeah, some of them just died of old age.
Yeah. I'm shocked the losers don't show up in other things.
Mike Hanlon shows up in Insomnia. That's the one thing I remember.
Well, that makes sense.
But yeah, because it's also in Derry.
Well, because like Ben and Beverly end up together, which I will say the made-for-TV movie did better than the book.
That's two times now.
What?
That the TV movie did something better.
Yeah, I think he had a hand in writing the script for that. Because that was that era where he got really involved in TV, because infamously he made his version of The Shining, which is horrible. And like he was involved with that, Tommyknockers, The Langoliers. It's kind of The Stand. He did write The Stand because it's the uncut version of The Stand.
And he has a cameo.
He has a cameo in
a side role. Yeah.
My favorite of his cameos in the TV stuff is the boardroom meeting in Langoliers, where like, and I'm like, because that's the first time I ever heard Stephen King speak, and I'm like, oh, that's how he talks. That's the most New England thing I've heard.
It shouldn't have surprised you.
I was a kid.
Yeah.
But anyway, what would you rank it?
It's tough. It's tough.
No pun intended.
Yeah, it is. Okay. 4 out of 5.
Me too.
I think it's good. I would definitely recommend it.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, it's not perfect. It has funky stuff because it's written by a drug addict who stuffed everything in there. And you get a lot of... Some of the stuff in here is among the best stuff he's ever written.
Mm-hmm.
I think we agree on that.
And I think style-wise, like the switching between present tense and past tense is almost always done perfectly. And when it switches in hindsight, it's weird at first when they make their blood oath at the end and it's in present tense, but thematically it makes sense. Because the past and present have become one, essentially. Thematic.
Yeah. So, I read this book 2 or 3 times.
Okay, you've read it more than me.
Yeah, since like 2013 was the first time I read it, I think.
How old were you?
Yeah.
How old were you when you read it?
14.
Okay, you were a little older than me.
Yeah. And yeah, first time, absolutely loved it. Second time, yeah, still really enjoyed it. These small problems and stuff. But definitely, this one earns its reputation as one of his best, I think.
Yes, and I get why people read this and don't read anything else.
Yeah, because then they think, oh, everything else is also this bloated.
Yes, I was talking to Matt Wilkins about this of all people. He's like, the only thing King he's ever read is On Writing, and I'm like, you should read some of these. He's like, they're too long, and like now he's aware of King and Twitter, and it makes him doubly not want to read anything. And like, I that's a fair point. Although he's now, we didn't talk about this in the last podcast. He's left Twitter.
Yeah, that happened.
He's now on Instagram Threads, along with a lot of spam and fake things.
That's where he announced, Talisman Free may be happening.
It's on Threads. I hate it. But I'm kind of glad. I wished he would have just stayed off social media, period, because it clearly makes him really upset.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do that to yourself, But anyway, next one. A book that was limited published a few years prior to this and then got a wide release after this, which is The Eyes of the Dragon.
That's going to be just a really nice palate cleanser.
Agreed. And I've already started it. I was initially going to read another one of the Dune books, but I'm like, I just want something really short because there's a new Alien book that comes out on the 7th. And I just want something that I can read in a couple days and then be ready for Alien if it takes like longer, like a week or so, if I want to take my time with it. So anyway, that's about all I have for today. I'll see you next time.